All right, we should be live now. We're back again. Welcome to the Deep Weeb podcast, a podcast about immersion-based learning without sacrificing personal development and other deep things like who is Alexander? I'm Kanji.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Alexander.
So Alexander, you're our first guest on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us for this. We came into contact because you've also been developing some Anki add-ons. I've done some work with that in the past, and I still maintain a couple. But yeah, go ahead and tell us a bit about the mystery, the man himself, Alexander Alemayhu.
Yeah, so I actually practiced before I came on the show. I'm really glad to be invited. Thank you very much. I've actually never been a guest on the show before. So, hey there, listener. My name is Alexander, and I'm an open source developer. So I make free tools to help people learn better, faster, and easier with Anki and Notion. And one of my current public projects is Notion to Anki. And it's being used by people all around the world. So it's awesome. And I'm really glad that I'm able to help people in their learning journey, because Anki can be very difficult, and I hope that it's going to be less challenging, but still challenging for
Completely
people.
agree with you. We haven't gotten too deep yet into our struggles and fun with Anki, but I think we'll probably uncover a little bit of that today. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the next section of the show, which is where we have this interactive chat piece. And if anyone, what we usually do in this part is any goal that somebody is working on, it can be encouraging to see how other people are making progress with something that they're passionate about, or at least focused on making progress towards. So in the last 2 weeks since our last podcast, if you've done anything that you're proud of, or that you're making headway with, you're trying out a new thing that seems to be giving you some gains, like go ahead and post that in a chat and we will shout that out. But in the meantime, while you guys are typing away at that, Alexander, what are your goals right now, and what are you making progress towards?
So to be honest, what I'm trying to do right now with Notion to Anki is to grow it. So I'm trying to make it more useful for people, because I was with a friend of mine, Turarin. He's learning Japanese too. So we were sitting at he lives at his mother's place still, but he's on the way to move out. So we were sitting on the couch and we talked about potential things, projects to work on. And I've always wanted to work on a project which I could work on for a long time. And one of the challenges he had with learning Japanese is that the card creation part is really painful. He uses 5 different tabs whenever he's creating a card. He has jisho.org. He has to figure out the mnemonic. He has to go to Forvo and download MP3 file. So he's a creative person. He creates art. He draws a lot. And for him, it seemed like there has to be a better way to do what he's doing, right? And there are some add-ons which automate some of this manual stuff. And one of the things we discussed was the card creation part. But the Anki has a lot of issues. Even the onboarding is problematic. People start using Anki and then they give up. So I wanted to tackle the card creation part, and that's what I'm trying to do now. That's my main goal. Hey, Alp, I see someone in the chat.
Hello, welcome.
So
Welcome.
cool to see you.
So that's the piece that you're focusing on right now, is the
Card creation. So, but like specific goals, it's like I'm trying to get my community to grow to the public goal is 100,000 users, right? And the not public goal is 300,000 users, because the idea is to so don't tell anybody, please, listeners, don't share it.
Here,
This is a secret. So we want to
Deep Weeb exclusive
users, and then we're going to do exactly. So a 1% conversion rate. So if you know about the super fans, there's an article written by someone where you convert your user base. So you essentially have similar stuff even in Reddit. Most people don't produce content. They are actually lurkers. So you actually have to have a big audience, and then you'll get a small conversion rate. So in my case, the conversion rate is Patreon, where people go and support me on Patreon. So I'm hoping, ideally, I should help as many people as possible. with this tool, and I still think that Anki has a long way to go. It's even just on version 2.35. No, sorry, 2.135. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of great opportunity for Anki.
So specifically, I would say, okay, so with Notion to Anki and what you're building there, what any breakthroughs or things that you've been focusing on in the recent last 2 weeks specifically, what's been on your mind?
So I don't remember all of the details. I don't even remember most of the stuff I did last week. But the general, one problem we have right now is that there are so many different people using Notion to Anki, right? We have medicine students who are the biggest group, and then we have language learners, and then we have people like me who abuse Anki and then use it to learn anything, right? I'm not using Anki to learn stuff. I will just take an article on the web and then create multiple close deletions and then just put it in Anki and then break down a complex article, for example. And that's not what Anki is meant for. And we have an issue where we're using the unit toggle lists, which is essentially a summary, and then you expand the summary with the detail, right? And that's a simpler thing to explain to people because it's visually easy to understand than a flashcard, because flashcards in themselves are not something you necessarily use a lot and know. But if you're using a note-taking system and you already know what the toggle is, where you have a summary and then expand it, but the problem I've tried to solve, and I think we found a solution, is how do you present those nested toggle lists if someone has hundreds of them, if someone has thousands of them? So I've been discussing with Alp, who's here too, on UIs that we could use. And I think we found something, and I'm prototyping it. So on our development branch, we have made some changes where one of the challenges, and I think this is also correct for upstream Anki, is that how do you make something simple? What is simple? If you have someone who's learning German and they're used to a lot of complexity, and then you have someone learning Chinese who almost never uses a computer, where do you strike the balance, right? If you're going to try to serve these so distinct and different people. So it's a real challenge, and I hope the UI ideas we have right now, which we come up with a few the last weeks, is something that's going to work. But the only thing we can do is make an experiment, push it out, make a YouTube video about it, show it to people, and then get feedback, and then make changes, because we don't know what is simple before someone starts complaining about how hard it is.
Right. With any software product you build, you need some sort of iteration cycle, right? So with that, I want to kind of jump back to your main premise here, which is Notion to Anki. And I'm sorry, I still haven't actually tried out Notion itself, so I still haven't tried out Notion to Anki either. But Notion is interesting, but I haven't used it yet, and I'm guessing there's a fair amount of language learners that probably haven't used it yet either. So give us kind of a quick flash of what Notion is and why that's useful to people learning things.
So the thing with Notion is it's not easy to understand. The first time I heard about it was probably in February, something like that, earlier this year. And I thought it was a note-taking app. And that's what I tell people. So if someone asks me, what is Notion to Anki? I tell them it's a note-taking app. But it's not really that. It's actually more interesting than that. It's a knowledge base where you can use some predefined building blocks and then build your own system. So I made a video a while back showing people how they could create their own workout templates. And that has nothing to do with...
I saw that one.
Oh, great. I hope you liked
it. Yeah, I liked it a lot. Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with note-taking. It's like a workout schedule, right? It's like, these are the days you work out. So you can use Notion and build a website with it. You can use Notion to build a custom to-do list. You can build a dashboard. You can essentially take information which is relevant for you and then group it and visualize it in a specific way. So Notion, because it's easy, visually appealing. It's easy to understand if you just experiment and try it out and look at other people's templates. And there is a big community in Notion. It's probably around the same size as the Anki community, maybe a little bit smaller, but it's easy to get started, and the initial entry is free, so you don't have to pay anything in the beginning. And what we did is like I tried to look at the card creation process in Anki, and I've been developing software for like close to 10 years now, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to build something, right? So I tried to attack the smallest problem I could attack, and that's just the conversion part. Because if you're going to come up with a new UI, it's kind of difficult, right? You have to dealing with input and output, and it's like, yeah, it's a challenge. So Notion already provides this one part where writing is pleasant, right? Generating text, generating output is pleasant. So Notion to Anki just takes that and makes a bridge to Anki where it will map what you wrote over to Anki flashcards. But Notion to Anki itself is not perfect, right? Because Anki inherently has templates.
I guess
how do you expose
real
that
quick?
UI?
Yeah. Before we get too deep into the Anki to Notion part, just again for the Notion part, I'm still thinking through kind of like how you would realistically use this like outside of Anki in general, because I think that's going to be kind of important, like for you to already be using this thing, or at least to take full advantage of it. You probably should be using this thing, and then that way you can, if this Notion piece is already integrated into your life, you can take advantage of that with Anki to actually.
Yeah, but not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, because like I was talking with another person who just wanted to ask me about specific parts, because they just started to use Anki recently, and they learned about Notion to Anki because I made a post in the subreddit about Notion to Anki, and they looked at the video and they thought, oh, this is a simpler way to make cards, because Anki is confusing for them, right? So they went ahead and learned about Notion just to do that, because we're streamlining the process. Even our code, right, has some limitations because we're saying this is what we support right now, because we don't have a UI to expose this complexity. So we are kind of limited. But
so I guess my question still is around like Notion itself. Like I'm thinking about what I'm using already that's filling in that space that Notion is. So I use Google Keep to take notes, and then I use Google Sheets to actually write down like sentences for language learning and that sort of stuff. And it sounds like Notion, in theory, so the pitch that I saw on it is that yes, you could use it for notes, and that's what stuck out to me. But then it also has this, like you said, like a I don't know, community, like almost like a wiki page style, like building WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get style of text creation. So in theory, you could build out something that, like if you're in software, you might have worked with a tool called like Confluence. It's made by the same people that do Jira. It's like a wiki style thing for like teams and like that sort of thing, and to share that. So is that more around like what Notion is standalone, or like what?
That's an interesting take. It can be. It's like Notion itself has these building blocks, right? So it has a block, and a block can be an image, it can be a link, it can be a background color, it can be a page, it can be a gallery, it can be a Kanban board, right? It can be like you can take all of those building blocks and you can build something like Jira, right? In Notion.
With like actions based on visual elements and that sort of stuff, or like is it mostly just display?
There's going to be some limitations. There's some limitations you're going to hit, but like you could, like I haven't used a lot of the dynamic parts, but I've seen some people, they can go really, really far with it. And you don't have any custom JavaScript or something like that, but the blocks, you can create a form-like system, right? Where stuff has these custom fields, right? In Notion, a page has certain attributes you can add to it. One feature I like using is the image one, where I can add a lot of previews everywhere. And I really like that because, like, for me, just a small touch, a lot of previews help, but I haven't personally used Notion in that direction that much, so I haven't hit the limitations.
So it's like a sandbox for your text, though.
I imagine
it has a very sandbox feel from the way you describe it, right? So then go ahead.
Yeah, but you can build your custom wikis, right? You can build your custom wikis. You can build a custom calendar. You could build a content calendar. You could build a really flexible to-do list. You could
your workout
build
routine, like you talked about, right? So is that one way that you're actually already using Notion? Do you was that just for an example, or is that something that you actually like really use like on a day-to-day basis? Or yeah.
I use that. I don't know if it's exactly on a day-to-day basis, because sometimes I memorize the schedule and then I just execute.
Writing it down can be the first step to memorizing
earlier
it, though,
today,
naturally, right? Yeah.
But earlier today, I looked at this week, and then I checked off everything. I updated all of my emojis, and I checked the week was okay, and then I edited my template, and then I created a new page from the template, right? So I have the schedule for week 41. So I use that one on a, at least, if not daily basis, on a weekly basis. But like, it's very interesting that you're saying this, and I'm definitely going to look it up. Like, what are the limitations with Notion? But for users, it can enrich their lives. But for someone who's hearing this for the first time, imagine Google Docs, right? Or a word processing UI, and then you could just go from the word processing UI to Anki flashcards. So imagine you're in Word, you're pasting in an image, you're adding a line, you're writing some text, and that will become either the front or the back of your card. And one thing that we're also doing, which I'm very glad for the community is good with, is that they are suggesting features, right? For example, close deletion was something people wanted. And so I said, okay, yeah, but we need to have a simple way to expose this. So what is simplicity, right? How do you communicate something simple? And what we came up with was, if we have a shortcut for it, and I like to say it, a shortcut we can explain to normal people, not someone who has a coding background or who has gone through HTML, CSS course, but someone who just reads the text and then we'll tell them, this is the shortcut for doing this. And if they understand what we did with close deletion. So we changed the word, the meaning of code, like the code block in HTML, for us means a close deletion.
Oh, interesting.
I wouldn't personally, I would have never made that connection, because I like to have code in some of my cards, and I wouldn't have considered that. But someone else proposed that when we were discussing it, right? And they came up with that solution, and it's working really well. A lot of people are using it, and they love
curious,
that
Jordan,
feature.
do you use close deletion at all with your Anki setup right now?
No. I did see that. I also saw that video of the closed deletion, because I was really intrigued. Like, oh wow, like I've used closed deletion in the past, but I haven't used it now. But I know, so in the video they were using it, like it was like the break your artery and some other artery. So I was like, oh, okay. So I see its use for the medical field and adding pictures and things like that. So like I see its benefits. I personally may not do it, but like I think it's good. One thing I wanna add. So for me, what I've gotten from Notion, because before hearing it from you, I saw a lot of people use it, like you said, to plan out their schedules and things like that. But it reminds me of kind of like an Evernote system. So I don't know if either
Google Keep is in that same bucket, right? Some cloud-based note-taking. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. One of the things, I feel like it's like taking your thoughts or your notes or learning, and it's kind of like organizing them into one little area. And one other thing that I liked about Notion, and that's why I'm glad you're here, Alexander, is its ability to link certain things. So, for example, let's say one person said that they were studying something from a textbook, and so let's say they were using like a certain terminology, and so it's easy to link that. So then once your notes become larger and vaster and wider, it's like linked together. So it's easier for you to access, like, oh, wait, where did I learn this word? Or like, what does this mean again? And you can click on it, and it could link you to all the places that have that, word in it. And so I think that kind of web, like mind web, is crazy for me, because I'm like, whoa, if you're learning, like you said, medical field or in school or anything that connects, it's like keeping all those things connected is super important.
It's really difficult to connect things inside of Anki. I don't know if you guys have ever tried that, but like linking one card to another card is almost impossible. Like you have to do hacky things.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't tried that personally, but one feature that I don't use a lot that I've seen people mention is the tags.
Yeah.
And that's like, for example, people were asking me about it for a long time until we added. So in Notion to Anki, strike through, like there's an HTML tag called strike through, which takes a text and then adds a line in the middle, right? You're striking through the text. That's essentially the shortcut we're using to add tags. And it works. And I think you could create the linking behavior with the tags in Anki, right? So you could, let's say you create, I like using this example, you have all of the capitals in Europe. And then if you wanted to group Scandinavia or link them together, as you call it, then you would just add a tag that's Scandinavia to those specific cards. So that would kind of create the behavior, but I don't really use that a lot. So, but it wouldn't create the one linking from one side to another. It would only create the linking of kind of grouping, right? One to what's it called? One to many or many to many. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think
that's
many. You have one.
There's different ones, right? One to many relationship versus this would be one tag has many other relationships. Oh man, bunch of software engineers in here.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
So with the specific thing that comes to my mind with that, and this is getting off topic from like what the tags do and what Notion does, is doing like with kanji, right? Like you've got a sentence that has like a bunch of different kanji in it, and then like for me, I learned kanji using Heisig's Remembering the Kanji. So it's a separate deck that has all your flashcards that just have like one kanji on them, right? But when you're actually going through your normal sentence cards and you're like, oh, wait, what is this kanji here? I forgot how I learned that. I forgot my mnemonic for it. Your mnemonic is on the other card in the other deck. Like, how do you link those things together? That's why, like, one of the things that I made was an add-on that links just specifically those things. Like for Heisig's, but once you get into more complicated things, it's kind of a mess. But yeah, go ahead.
That I think the only person I know who's done something similar is I don't know if either of you heard of Japanese Level Up. So his name is Adam.
No.
So he has his own. Yes, he has his own like SRS.
He made his own SRS too. I didn't know that.
One thing that. Yeah. And so like he sells like pre-made decks on his site. And one of the things that I loved is like, let's say he has a word like in the monolingual transition. So, Japanese to Japanese sentences, he'll have like a word, and let's say like, oh wait, you've learned, there's like a definition. And that it's like, oh, you know this word that's in the definition, but you don't know where. If you click it, it'll link back to the original card that it's from. And it'll show you, like, you can do that. And like, but like, I remember him saying on the blog post, he's like, this was like painstakingly hard for him to do. He's like, I think he had to manually do those things. So it wasn't like a streamlined process, but like, I think the ability to do that and to have those links is like tremendous, but like at what cost, And so like, I think that's one of the reasons why he like, the prices are a little bit higher, because he is manually doing it. He is doing that himself. But like you said, being able to link those two together.
So like, tags are one way people do those, help. Right? And okay. So I mean, what else? What's Notion to Anki? We're talking about how you essentially streamline the card making process, right? What other things are you guys running into right now that you feel like are innovations for making that a smoother process?
Yeah, so that's actually a huge topic, and like you just have to let me know when it gets too detailed, because like the add-on ecosystem stuff is something I've been complaining about for a long time, and at some point I'll probably do something about it. And I've talked with Guillem, one of the contributors upstream in Anki. And I think like we can't expect Damien to do that kind of work, because he has signaled his his preference, right? Add-ons are not officially supported in Anki. That's just the way it is. And
is Damien the creator of Anki?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know him personally. I just know his name from the GitHub, right? Also from the manual. So I don't even know how he looks like, just so you know. But like the Anki add-on stuff is not, it's not ideal. It's not ideal for us as users, and also for the technical side, right? People who have technical background and can actually work around it. and it's horrible for the users. There are limitations. For example, you install an add-on, you have to restart Anki. Breaking changes. So these are concrete problems, and I think it's better to talk about the problems than the solutions, because the solutions I have in mind don't exist today. So it's like fairy talk, like wishful thinking. But I want to address some of those topics when I have better time, and I hope to. I have some ideas around, like, is there some other? Could we revamp the Anki add-on infrastructure and propose something new? Is there something we could do in Rust that can provide some kind of ABI, like an application binary interface that's more stable, and so that when you make an add-on today, it works for 10, 15 years instead of the first thing. But
no, but like let's just be honest about the situation, which is every time you update Anki, there's a good chance all of your add-ons will break. Because, I mean, luckily on the minor versions, it's not as bad. But because they've been doing so much work on the Anki side to make things better, and it has been moving forward, I think, in really large ways, impactful ways. But because of that, when you're doing things like that the user doesn't really care about, doesn't know they care about, things like updating the QtPy framework behind the scenes, that breaks almost all of the API integrations that somebody has with the visual layout things. So I think you're on the right path here with what you're saying, which is that, first off, like, before we come up with a solution, let's talk about what the problem set is, which is something that in business I see a lot, where people will want to say, oh, well, let's just do this. Well, it's like, okay, well, let's get out first what all the problems are. And then once you have those, then you can build out what your feature requirements are, and then build a solution based around that. So not to go off on too much
that makes too much sense in the business world. I feel like I get that all the time. Oh yeah, we should, but that kind of logic is like exactly what we need. But I feel like explaining that to the higher ups is always like, okay, do you really understand what I'm saying, or are you just
Exactly, like that's one of the things I think about a lot is, like, Jordan, as you were saying, do you really understand it too? Like, there might be really good reasons why in the implementation it is this way, right? Maybe it's not possible a specific way, but I like to have a positive mindset on it, and let's talk about it, and then we can see what happens, because maybe you come up with a really good idea. Who knows? So it's better to do that than, at least for the add-on stuff. There's so many people involved, right? I don't think you're going to be able to come to a solution just like that. You would have to, I think the right thing to do is to think about the problem for a while, come up with some ideas, and then try to engage the community upstream, right, in Anki, and say, hey, this is the current state of affairs. And nobody really is happy with it, right? I don't know anyone who's happy with it. Everyone I talk to, okay, some people are not happy with the way I talk about it, because off mic, I do get salty, and I do say some really not nice things, because that's my personal.
I feel like it's passion. I feel like it's not like you want to badmouth the people. It's like you are genuinely interested in helping and providing a solution and talking about these things. But it's like sometimes they're not even acknowledging.
I mean, the devil's advocate side here. I'll just jump in real quick. The devil's advocate side is, I don't think we could have the ecosystem that we do at some point somebody has to take ownership for that API piece. Luckily, the way that Damien built it, in my opinion, is in a way that anybody can do anything, and that is great for developers still in the temporary, right? It enables people to do things quickly that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. But you're right, it doesn't scale, and I think that's what we're talking about here, is that Anki has literally millions of users now. So it's not some developer's pet project. So now we have to think about, how do we actually build things in a way that actually scales. But sorry, go ahead. We were talking about getting salty around Anki.
No. I don't know about Jordan, so I can't really talk to about your experience, Jordan. But from what I know from you, KanjiEater. Sorry, it's
cool. Kanji on the stream is good.
But Kanji on the stream, KanjiEater. So I know you have written add-ons based on what I've read and heard, right? So you actually have more experience than me, because I have been so frustrated when I look at the Anki add-on support that I just stop doing it. I just leave the computer. Like I just stop and I go away.
What piece frustrates you about it?
So when I go to the documentation and I read there's no official support, just right there, I just can't take it. I can't take it, and I come in with the best intentions of making official add-on. So I haven't actually written any add-on code. The Notion to Anki site it's a separate project. It's open source. You can get the code and everything. You can study it, but it's not running as an add-on, right? It's a web application and with the web server. It's using the Anki Python library to do a lot of the Anki integration bits. And then it's just in Anki.
Okay.
Anki. It's a Python library for generating the AP, the binary files that you can import in Anki with the DEX, right? But we don't have any like live or syncing directly. Everything is manual. You upload a file, right? So we have bypassed the Anki add-on stuff. It's not the ideal situation, but it's the simple approach, because I don't think it's right with the add-on stuff where it just breaks with versioning. So can you tell us more about the add-on stuff? Like, do you sit down and write Python? Are you writing React? Like, what are you doing in order to get your add-on to work?
When I have written Anki add-ons, so first off, haven't been writing any recently. Like, I wrote a couple that I needed to accomplish some very specific tasks a while ago, got them to a good enough point where it was good enough for me, and then people would ask me, hey, can you share this? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll upload it. And that was kind of my approach to it at the beginning, is I'll get it good enough. If people say there are enough bugs, like maybe I'll fix this thing here or there, but it does, the things that I do work. So specific to your question, like, how do I deal with, what am I writing it in? So
yeah, like I'm just curious on it from a technical perspective, because I just see that there's some Python stuff and there's some hook APIs. So like I don't understand what is the life of add-on development.
So first off, I will say yes, lots of Python. It's pretty straightforward from a developer standpoint, looking at other add-ons, because there's so many of them. So if you try out a different add-on, it's like, oh, well, these people have a way to, for instance, scan all of the cards in your Anki deck and generate something from them. Like if we think about the Japanese language add-on, there's a way to give your kanji like actual readings under them, right? So have one field with a reading, one field with a normal expression, and then one field with the generated piece off of that. So in general, yeah, you're going to be looking at somebody else's file where they're doing like some Python stuff, and Python is the language that Anki is written in. It's an easy way for Anki to be able to pick up your file that you wrote and then execute the code that's inside of it. So yes, that is the basics of it. I will say, when I was working in the 2.0 days, it was a lot more difficult to do things like dependencies, which for people that don't know, that aren't programmers, that just means somebody else wrote a piece of code somewhere else. It already does the thing that you want. You want to be able to include that in whatever you're doing. So for instance, let's say you want to escape characters in that's a very technical example, but like HTML, we're talking about HTML, right? That's how you lay out things visually in these fields. Sometimes you copy and paste something off a website, you're actually technically copying out formatting inside of that, and that formatting lives as HTML. So if you want something like a library that automatically escapes the HTML around that, well, you can either write your own hacky code for it, or you can take the work that somebody else has done and use that. And so in the early days, that was almost impossible. Like you would have to import their things. And here's the thing about importing dependencies. It's called a dependency tree because it has its own dependencies. And then those dependencies have their dependencies. And so doing something like that turned out to be near impossible. So what I ended up doing when I had to do this I have one add-on that it actually generates images for text. So if you give it like a keyword, it will actually give you, like you have the keyword banana, it will get you a keyword, an image of a banana and put that on your Anki card. Okay. So like the thing that I did is I knew that I couldn't at that point import something that was going to be able to go fetch images like I wanted. So I had to actually build a server. So something outside of Anki running on somebody else's computer out on the cloud. And that is what then I would hit from the Python. So to answer your question, I'm building all up back to your question, which is, yeah, I wrote some Python, and then I also wrote some Python somewhere else, and that runs in a different place. And both of those things combined to make whatever I wanted. I've never used something like full templating languages. So we're talking about things that would actually show on people's cards, like React, JavaScript, those sorts of things. Haven't done anything like that besides writing my own JavaScript to do extremely simple things like toggle readings of characters on and off, like that sort of basic stuff.
I see. So that's actually very interesting, because I was talking with Guillem a while back, or not just, I don't remember the exact time, but basically we talked about offloading stuff, right? And I think that's an interesting approach for stability, right? You let the server deal with the work, because the server can add more dependencies, right? So you don't have to have the dependency hell on the client side. So that's actually pretty clever. But have you used the Qt APIs for graphical stuff? I'm also curious on the graphical user interface.
Nothing innovative as far as on the actual graphical side of it. Like, yeah, I've done pop-up boxes, I've done like loading bars, that sort of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
Because that's where I think, sorry to interrupt you, that's where I think the simplicity lies, right? I think like the Anki ecosystem is like a great opportunity for this. You can deliver some really custom UIs, and then just one add-on, for example. Imagine if you could just add a Google image anywhere inside of Anki. You could just hit the button, and then a pop-up UI comes up with the grid of images, right? And then you just pick it, and then it's going to be added to the card automatically. You don't have to open a tab. There's so much UI automation you can do. And I think that the reason why it doesn't exist is that these developers, I'm not saying anything negative, that's not what I mean, but these developers either probably don't have the necessary skills to make these kinds of applications inside of Anki, or maybe they don't want to, or I don't know what the other reasons could be, but it's too risky, in my opinion, to make them right now. Yeah, sorry, Jordan.
The only person I know who has done something like that is, so his name, I think he goes by Yoga on Twitter. He's made like a few add-ons, and he does, like, his add-on does have like what is it? Google. So you mentioned like clicking Google images. So when you search like a word in Japanese, you can include it to have a Google image.
They made an entire dictionary inside of Anki. That takes some graphical UI work.
Yeah. So
whoa,
I think if you want more information on add-ons, I would say go talk to him on Twitter for sure. Like he has sorry, say that again.
Yoga, that's his name.
I think he would have some really good lessons learned from that too, because I know one of the points of tension there with Yoga was he had to continually update these and keep in pace with the issues that you're kind of talking about from the Anki development side, and that did take a significant amount of work. I remember him saying, so there was some tension between him and Anki as well. But anyway,
that's typically why I don't update, because it breaks, and I'm like, okay, I've noticed that every time I update, everything breaks, and I sometimes can go in and fix it, but like I don't want to fix add-ons. Like I have the knowledge to do it, but I'm like, why should I be fixing these things? Like I got it.
My add-ons also have been really simple. Like I've avoided doing what you're talking about, where you pick out images from a grid or something like that. Like my like image grabbing one, it makes the choice for you, because it's supposed to be something you can just automate and not think about. Like you highlight 100 or 2,000 of your words, your sentence cards, and then you go get images for all of them. Like for me, it's the sort of stuff that I don't want to spend the time actually looking at. Like that's so I've kind of avoided that problem with my style of using Anki. Yeah.
Yeah, so like for me, like I don't want to dwell too deep on it, but I think like you have to look at it from the user standpoint. And I try to like, it's very difficult for me to do it, but I try very hard to develop sympathy for the user and try to understand them. So I ask them questions when they reach out to me, and I solicit feedback. But I also, when I use Anki, I try to think like really hard sometimes, like how would this be for a user who doesn't know anything about code or who doesn't understand this part of Anki? And I think like then that really has to be tackled. Either like, I'm not saying we have to go all the way to make add-ons so easy that anyone can make them, but like the initial, the maintenance and the initial investment, like it should be easier. It should be much, much easier. Like at least creating the rich UIs and providing some customization on that. That part should be. Yeah, I look forward to the future. Anki has a.
What do you think about young. Like, so Anki in theory is like platform independent. So like you make something on OS X, it's going to work on your Windows machine too. And that, I would say 95% of the time I've seen that seems to be the case. But then there's also like Anki Droid, is like, and there's no add-on support for that. And I don't even know about the iOS one, because
that's not actually correct, because I'm actually supporting David on his Patreon, and the developer or one of the developers. I think there are multiple people on the project, and some are probably not active longer. And I think there is a custom version of Anki Droid which has some of the add-on behaviors. So you get. I don't use it.
I had heard that people are making forks of it, and I also heard that they're going to be exposing APIs so that people could like do add-on things for things like load balancer is one that was actually hung up in PRs because of this. The load balancer, for anybody that doesn't know, is sometimes when you're doing a lot of Anki reviews, you can get a lot that stack up on a day. The load balancer add-on is something that can, in theory, kind of even it out so that you have more consistent reviews. It's not an officially supported thing in the normal Anki, so you use an add-on, but then you can't do that on mobile. So if you're reviewing on mobile, you're actually at a disadvantage. So that's what I'm talking. Yeah.
That's why I stopped. Yeah, that's why I stopped using mobile, because I was like, oh, I'm not getting some of this add-on things. Let me.
Right. So it's like, okay, yeah, you could go out, and that's what I did. There was a custom version for the load balancer one, so that's what I was using. But there's still not a way that I know of to do that.
I personally haven't looked at the JS API that detailed, but I was talking with Guillem, and I was discussing like I have a few ideas. Like I balanced the ideas off, and I listened to people, asked them what they think. So I asked them, what if we could build like a system where you could compile down your add-on, like a tool chain, a compiler tool chain, which takes the Python code and like from the vanilla add-ons right now and compiles it down to a JavaScript API. So creating an ecosystem for that, and then using the deck description, adding add-on support via the deck description, because Anki is like, in my opinion, a glorified web browser. That's what it is, and you can actually use it. You can run JavaScript.
Are you talking about like Anki, reviewing a card is like a web browser?
No. Reviewing a card is like a browser. The deck description part is a browser. Like the web view stuff, I consider that the browser, because you can run HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you have access to all of the web APIs which are supported in that specific
I really
UI,
view
right?
Anki itself is just a wrapper around a database. That's why it acts and behaves the way it does, and it's a little slow and clunky at times, is because you just have a giant database with all your cards in it. You want to add a new one? Oh, we'll just make a new entry in the database. It's that easy. And that's where a good UI comes into this.
Yeah, exactly, right. You could add some really nice stuff on top, but we asked Damien, because he has the iOS app, right? So if we manage to figure out an approach to make it work on Android, that would be the proof of concept. So you get add-on support that way. But getting it into the iOS one is harder, because it's a proprietary application. You have to pay $25 to get it, and you're supporting the Anki developer.
The only official way, right?
So I have. Exactly. But like he did not recommend us to use the deck description, because like, yes, you can run JavaScript in there, but it's not a blessed way to do it. So like, how could you get Anki add-ons generically available on mobile. But I was curious, Jordan, have you made any Anki add-ons yourself, or?
No, I haven't. I've thought about it, I think, but I have like a love-hate relationship with Anki, where like I've used it so much over the last 10 years that like I really like, I'm like, I don't know, like it's good. It definitely has helped my Japanese improve, but after a while I'm just like, man, there are a lot of hurdles, there are a lot of things to get over that I could dive into and make my own add-ons or look at some of the code and try to, go with that. But I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily want to. Like, is it, I like, my mind is like, is it worth it? Or like, is there an audience for it? Like, I know now that there is, but it's like, do I want to go down the path of, because sometimes I tell people, they're like, oh, how do you learn Japanese? Like, should I be using Anki? And I'm like, yes, but like, I know, like in the back of my mind, part of me is saying like, okay, like Anki is really, there's a learning curve. There's a steep learning curve. Yeah, if you're not technical, it's hard to, make that adjustment. So I would rather sometimes like tell people to like, hey, maybe you should just kind of like, stick with the basics, or stick with like if someone has like a pre-made deck or has something to where it makes it easier for them to do it, it's like I almost tell them to go towards that route, just because it's like, okay, once they have that basic foundation, then like I feel like the what it would be like to edit my own cards or do this. Once that appears, then it's like, okay, bam, I got them. So it's just like that way they can learn that on their own. That natural like instinct to learn more and to do more is there already, versus someone who's never used Anki before and doesn't necessarily know how it's going to work or how it, when to update, when to not update, and things like that. And so, I feel like I don't want to push them away from Japanese or whatever language they're learning, with the hardness and roughness that Anki can sometimes provide.
I think so I think you're touching on something really important there too. That idea that like just in language learning, I think it's at this point it's almost well-known best practice that you should be making your own cards, right? You shouldn't be using pre-made decks, because if you make it yourself, simply the act of doing that is going to make it stick in your brain a little bit better. But the thing is, that takes a lot of work, a lot of mental effort. My least favorite part these days is actually making my cards. So it's like, if you can figure out ways to do that better, it's like, yeah, like probably like Jordan saying, like most people like have such a high barrier to entry. They're just going to take pre-made stuff to start with, and who can blame them? That was definitely me. I'm still not at a point where I'm actually making all my own cards. I have essentially a database of cards that I pull from. But so let's talk a bit more about like Notion to Anki then. Like you're talking about like, can you give us a little bit more details on how people are actually using this today?
Yeah, so the really good points, Jordan, and I'm divided on that, because like how to think about it, because and how to introduce it to a new person, because I actually there was one girl I have Japanese classes. I started learning Japanese in 2010, and I've made my own applications, and I've had a love and hate relationship too with Anki, and I introduced Anki just recently to one of my classmates, and I told Christina, the girl, I told her to just use shared decks, and that I said that because she shouldn't get overwhelmed. And but like when someone comes into the Notion to Anki community, that it's very obvious. We encourage you to create your own flashcards, and most people who use it, I think they do, but there is a segment of the community who maybe they go to the same university and then they work together. Like some people do some parts and then they export, right? Because some of the batch features we have support for is used by them, like multiple pages. So that way, Notion has some collaborative features, and I think that's also something that's popular among these students, because they can then split up the pensum or the whatever the lecture is. You take that part, I take that part, and then they share the decks to each other. But I haven't looked at Anki Web, like how many of our, because now we've started adding a banner in the deck description, so we can actually see. It's not tracking it, but maybe I'm going to take a look and see. I don't know if that answered the question. Sorry.
Yeah, I do have a.
No, go ahead.
Oh, go
You're
ahead,
good,
Kanji,
Jordan.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So so that did answer a little bit. So my question, another question I have is, so if I am a new user to Anki to Notion, and I already know Notion, how would I go about, using your service? Like, what would I do?
Yeah, so what you would do is most likely you would probably learn about it via one YouTube video. That's the funnel, right? That's how people learn about it right now. But actually, one of the things that's surprising is that since I am mostly a web developer now, right, I have learned a few tricks. So I've used those tricks in the project, and we actually have a really high channel traffic from organic search. So that's actually our biggest channel. So people just search and then they discover us. And we have strategically placed videos all around the website, so you can actually very quickly see how the tool is used in practice, right? But I think many people actually do learn about Notion to Anki also by someone in their class introduces it to them, and then they start sharing it because they love it. It's helping them. But you would start with the page, and then you would create your own toggle, or you would I abuse it, just so it's repeated. I really abuse it. I take an article and I use closed deletions all the time. It's not good. I don't recommend to do it the way I do it, but I really would like to repeat make your own cards, really. So you should make your own cards. It's a waste of time using shared decks, and I try to repeat it to people, but it's I don't know.
Sometimes I feel like I don't mind shared decks, but it's like the problem, in my opinion, like shared decks in the beginning, like for Japanese or language learning, I think it's okay because the reason I say this is because I sometimes think there are two unknowns. So you're learning a new language and you're trying to learn the software Anki.
Oh
Like it's like dealing with both is so tough and so abrasive to some people that I'm just like, you know what? Just get a shared deck. That way you get good enough to where you get to the point where it's just like, now I want to start learning more of my own. Now how do I, like I said, that natural, tendency, curiosity rises, and then I feel like that can help you like make your own decks and things like that. But like,
I don't really know when the actual right time is to introduce Anki. I think Anki is a valuable tool in language learning, but when is the right time, right? Should you introduce it in a bit, like if you're learning Japanese for the first time, right? You will stumble on Anki at some point. That's just guaranteed. That's how the journey of learning Japanese is, right? Someone somewhere will tell you about Anki at some point. If it's a video, so it doesn't matter. So like, when is the right time to be introduced to Anki? Is it after you've learned a little bit of Japanese, or is it since day one? I don't know. But one thing that happens with beginners is that, and this happened to me many times, it's like you think you understand Anki, it's going to help you. You start seeing some of the magic I actually start remembering stuff. Spaced repetition works. And then you go to Anki Web and then you download 50 decks and then you just quit using it after a while. That's what happened. You get overwhelmed,
or you're not understanding exactly what's going to be in that review queue. Like, how many am I actually supposed to do today that will guarantee that I will spend at least this much time tomorrow? And that was one of my biggest struggles with Anki in general, is figuring out how to manage your time with it. It's like, okay, if I learn 35 new cards a day, I will be on the breach of suicidal thoughts in a month. Like it's pretty awful. Like and that was one of the things that I found, is somebody actually told me, if you're not learning 35 new cards a day, like you're not going fast enough and you won't be able to retain things. It was absolutely insane. I got through 2K really fast, like 2,000 like core Japanese words, but like my retention was pretty bad on them. I learned way too much, way too fast. So it was like, once I actually started finding people that would say like, okay, well, learn 10 new cards a day. It's like, even still, it's like, how long am I going to have to review tomorrow? How many cards am I actually going to have? That's still one of the big hurdles there. And I can only speak from my own experience. I add 10 new cards a day. I have about 100 reviews the next day. It takes me about an hour to get through them. So that's where I'm at right now with it. 6 years in, still figuring it out.
Still figuring it out. That's the
I mean,
hashtag.
that's life in general, and especially with something as robust as Anki, it's like it really is. It's a very efficient way to learn things that are very specific. If you need to brute force memorize something, spaced repetition is a good way to do it. Like there's books like Make It Stick that reinforced this to me when I was on the breach of, do I quit Anki? Do I keep going? It's like, okay, you need some way to offset the learning curve, right? And so I think there are better ways probably to do it that we'll find, but yeah, that's what I'm stuck with right now.
Yeah. I see. I use the bury feature. I just learned about the bury feature
I don't use
recently,
that.
and it's
tell us
helping.
about that.
You don't use the bury feature.
Me neither. Tell me about it. I don't use it either.
Basically, one challenge that I have is that I create a lot of low yield cards because I create my own cards, but I use the text from other people because I like breaking up articles or a presentation, right? So I can use the actual written text in the format, whatever it is, right? So the result is, since I'm overusing close, I have these low yield cards. Essentially what I mean with low yield cards is the cards are either of a bad quality or I have a hard time memorizing them because it's just too much information in one card. So bury is essentially a feature in Anki where you can say to Anki, hey, Anki, this card, just shove it one day in the future without affecting the algorithm. I don't want to say again, I don't want to say good or something like that. I just want to shove it to the future. Just bury this card for me, and then it's going to be back tomorrow, essentially. It's being delayed with one day. That's what I understand from the bury, and I like it because it's helping me get through the problems I have right now. But what I should do is stop creating 50 cards once every week, and instead go to a ritual where like one of my Japanese classmates, he creates one card per day, right? He creates one high quality card, and over time he has really nice, good looking decks because he's even hand drawing some of the pictures there, right? So his decks are more they're more pleasant to review, right?
Yeah.
Because you're spending so much time per card. So bury is just it's like a patch on top of a bigger problem, like duct taping.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I don't hate actually doing the reviews now, is because of what you're describing, which is you have to make it something pleasant, right? So for me, that means quite a few things. I need an image on the card. I hopefully have some audio on the card. Maybe I have some interesting statistics about it, meaning things like how often is this thing actually used, right? Those sorts of things. Make it easy and pleasant to actually do it. Make it remind you of good times you had watching anime or something like that. I don't know how that works in the medical field. Maybe you have some good memories attached to your left elbow or something, but I can't speak to that experience. But back to I think I'm not sure if I'm clear yet. Like, how do you actually use Notion to Anki?
Yeah, so I probably have we've had variations of that question. So let me try to drill down. So essentially what you can do is you can use a web browser. You can go to notion.so, the website, or you can download a desktop version, or you can use it on mobile. So it's different, like depending on where in the world you are, you might use different things.
Because so Notion has an app. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, Notion has a iOS app. I haven't tried the Android. They might have an Android app. I don't know that. But I've used it mostly. I actually have Notion on the iPad now, and I have notes for the podcast that hopefully I'm gonna ask some things later. But essentially, you would create a page in Notion, right, after you've signed in. I use Google, SSO. I log in with Google, and then I just create a page, and then create a title. I pick an emoji because we put the emoji in the deck title, and we also take Notion has page covers, so it's essentially a banner. We also add the banners to the deck, and you start creating something called a toggle. That's the unit, right? So you could create, you hit the, there's a context menu in Notion where you can create these blocks, which it supports. And our supported block is the toggle one. And it's like an arrow pointing on the right side, the direction.
Mhm.
And when it's you can write a line, and that's basically the header, the first line. Inside has the arrow, which becomes black when it has content inside of it. So by default, it's gray. So you pick a title, and if you use close deletion, you don't need a body, right? And a body means we treat the toggle header as the front of the card, and whatever is inside is the back of the card. That's the default behavior. So you can create basic cards. We support all of the card types you have in Anki by default. So you can use close deletion, which is the code tag. So it's going to mark it. So if you're familiar with Markdown, you can use the code tick marks, and you can use Markdown in Notion. So it supports Markdown. So I think that's also one of the reasons it's pleasant for me to use. Not only do you have the WYSIWYG stuff, the nice, pleasant for normal people, but you have the shortcuts for power users. And then when you've done that, you just hit the hamburger menu or 3 dots, and then you get the new context menu, and then you export as HTML. And the reason why it's HTML is because we initially supported Markdown, but the problem with the Markdown is that it's not consistent with the HTML. When you export with HTML, there is more information in the markup about the page. And there is actually some bugs with Notion, which we have problems with. Some underlining, which is critical for medicine students, which we don't support currently because it's just not present in the markup. And that's probably some export bug, which we should report upstream. I need to get my act together and report all of the Notion bugs. And when you've exported that, depending on the complexity of your page, it might be a zip file, right? So if you have images, it will try to create relative paths to the images and create directories for the various pages. So a medicine student would have a complex hierarchy. We had anatomy, some other parts, and then it would be grouped logically for the student, right? But Notion would export it as a zip file. It would be big in that case, or it would be a single HTML file, depending on the size. And then you upload that file to the website Notion to Anki or to Anki.net. And to Anki reads, or Notion to Anki reads that file. It decompresses the zip file. It goes through it and tries to figure out what you are sending. Some people can just upload multiple files, and then it reads the HTML, and then it creates a JSON payload which describes your deck or decks, also plural, in the case where you have multiple decks. And then it uses the GenAnki library and generates the APG file, which will contain... so APG is the format Anki uses where you can export decks and then publish them, right? Or you can import them. And it has a collection file, and then it has the media, right? So the collection is the SQLite, it's compressed, and the media is all of the either audio, images, whatever, right? Whatever you have attached in your deck. And then that file you open in Anki, and then you get your decks. So that's the process, and it works. I wish we could eliminate the import-export, because my dream is to provide insane value, right? I want to, you as the user, I want to help you as much as possible. I know how hard this journey is. I know it sucks hitting the export button, downloading a file, uploading it somewhere else, getting a new file, and then importing it. Just listen to me telling you about it. It's horrible. It's really sad that we have to do it that way, but that's the current state. And I look forward to the future where we can look back a few years from now and look back and think, do you guys remember how terrible the Anki add-on system stuff was? Do you remember the crap we had to deal with? Just look at what we have now. This is so much better than what we had X number of years. So I'm looking forward to the future, because I think both you, KanjiEater, and Jordan, like both of you probably have a lot of skill sets. So what you consider easy is not necessarily easy for other people. It might be extremely difficult. So that's one of the things I try to do. Just stay humble. Like, you don't know who's using this, where in the world. You don't know their life situation. You don't know the challenges they're facing. And it's difficult, but I always try to set myself in that perspective. Like, what I'm considering easy right now might be really, really hard for someone else. So it's... I hope we make it better, but the current flow is you export, import files, essentially. I don't know. Did that cover the question?
That completely covers it. I'm very clear now on how we would use this thing. I'm curious as far as like, so let's just give an example flow then. Like, if we're talking about me being a Japanese language learner, right now I'm writing down keywords inside of a Google Sheet doc, and that's just my ongoing list. And eventually, I dump those out into Anki. Find a card that is already made that has some sentence from anime in it at some point, and I'll find one of those sentences that has that keyword in it, and I'll use that. Okay, but if someone like me was to adopt kind of what your style is, or any language learner, like we're talking about, they would probably be encountering this word, and then they have the flexibility of using Notion anywhere, right? It's essentially on, well, I think there was some question around Android, but it's in a readily...
Yeah. No. Android,
Gotcha.
I don't use it personally, but
Cool.
I know some users use it. So like they use it. So I've seen like one contributor from the community actually made a video. I just remembered it right now. I'm going to send you the link where he made a video showing us how you use Notion, Anki, and Anki Droid, and like how you do that
right
process.
No, you're good.
Sorry.
So anyways, where I was going with that though is that it's readily accessible on many platforms. So you would take your notes instead of like in some sort of alternative note-taking app, you put it in some sort of page layout that you guys have. Use the specific block type there, however, to get a word in there. But in theory, like my workflow would not work, and that's fine because, like I said, my workflow actually isn't ideal. I'm not making my own cards. What would be ideal is you need to take the full sentence from something for language learning, in theory. Put that inside of Notion Anki, then export those, and that would be the ideal way, probably. In general, like I don't think me writing down just a single keyword out of context is actually the best way. It's just I'm old and I've done that for 6 years, so that's why I'm still doing it. I should probably do something like what you're talking about, which is take full sentences. Or you didn't say that, I said that. But anyways, besides the point, we slam that inside of Notion. A full sentence, then you export that. Then, in theory, you've got that inside of Anki as a card, and it's prettier than it otherwise would be, and it's also easier to do an export from that than, say, copying and pasting all of your things out of a Google Sheet over and over and over, whereas you could just automate that. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's about right. And there are some limitations currently. Like, for example, one thing that students tell me is that with regards to the copy pasting, is that we save them like either hours,
I believe that,
or we save them days,
I believe that.
Literal days, because they sit there. These people are not writing code; they're total normal people. They don't use computers unless they have to, so they copy paste one thing at a time. So the way they learn Anki, it just takes forever. So they can just go straight from their notes to Anki flashcards, right? The export and import step is usually really fast. There are some edge cases. For example, I know some doctors who use it and they are really using a lot of images, right? So there is one doctor who runs his own version, right? And we've made it easy to run it. So it's just okay in that case. But sorry, I lost the question. My bad. What was the like?
I was just asking about, is that the basic flow of how you would actually go about adding?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now I remember. Yeah. So the issue is like the way you use it today. It's optimized for I create my cards, right? It doesn't mean that the text that's actually in front of you is written by you, but the whole experience is that I will be able to generate my cards. So there are certain things we don't expose currently. For example, the templates, those are not exposed. The fields are not exposed, and there are reasons for that. It's because people keep asking me about the styles because they're not happy with the default styles, right? We're optimizing for the default case where we just use the CSS from Notion and then just put that in your card, in your templates, right? And it creates a huge mess for some people. They're not happy with it, and we're gonna address the fields, the custom fields, and we have some really cool ideas for UIs. But the problem is like, is it simple enough? And the way you use it is like that. Yes, you would break down a sentence or a word, but you can still imagine if you could just use Google Docs and it would generate flashcards for you. That's essentially the value proposition we're providing. The Google spreadsheet, you can do the same. You could, inside of a Google spreadsheet, you could paste the image, right? Have you tried that? Just pasting an image? You should try that just to experience it. So it's not so smooth. But in Notion, it is actually smooth. You can just add an image. There is a service called Unsplash, which I use a lot, and you can just, it's essentially a service which has a lot of high quality images, and there is a generous copyright license, so you can use them. And I think we don't need to address this, but this is a problem with the Anki shared deck stuff,
Gotcha.
the copyright issues. Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting, but I really think that we all can actually provide a lot of value for both new users and also experienced Anki users, because either you could provide value in producing content, and that's one of the things we're trying to do with the YouTube, right? We're trying to provide value to the Notion community and also the Anki community, because it is hard to use Anki, and I hope it gets even better, right? It's going to get easier and easier. But have you thought about providing like Anki lessons? I know the Anking people are doing it. They have tutoring. Have you guys thought about it? I'm just curious.
Not even for a second. Yeah, that's interesting, and that's one of the things I was gonna comment on. Is I think your strategy of having people using your it's not an add-on, your product in various ways. And kind of showing off how different people are using it and then uploading that to your YouTube channel is definitely interesting, because it's like you said, it's difficult to see how people are actually using Anki. Like, I haven't documented what my setup is on Anki anywhere. I think at one point I'll probably at least talk through what I'm doing with Anki in a little more detail, but yeah.
I would love to see that. I would love to see it.
Yeah, I've been, now that you said that, I've been thinking about like going over my workflow for like creating cards for Japanese, just to cut it out there and show people what I'm doing. It works, it gets the job done. Thought of like, let me do tutorials for Anki specifically, because I don't know, like I do work a lot with like UX UI design and like getting feedback from, so I think that's super important, and like getting the feedback from the people who are using it is invaluable. Like you exactly, like just a workaround, or just, I love seeing the workarounds that people come up with, where it's like, oh, like Anki can only do this, like, oh, our workaround is to do this, and I'm like, whoa, I would have never even thought of that. So but like Anki specifically, it's a beast, and like I know how tough it can be. So part of me is like, nah, not really, but maybe it would be worthwhile at least documenting like how I'm using it to show.
Yeah, I definitely think it would be valuable. For example, I've been fortunate enough to talk with like several Anki users by now, and like I share my ways and how I do things. So if I learn about something new, like the bury, for example, it's new to me, so I have no problem sharing it.
Yeah.
But like when I see someone else and then I see how they use it, so someone was showing me their card templates, and I was just thinking, seriously, my cards are so complex. I'm violating the minimal principle thing.
Me too.
And I could actually, if I just spent some more time creating better card templates, I would actually get more value from them. And that's something I realized by just someone else showing me their Anki setup. So like, there is no right way to do Anki. I think it's different, and I think it's really valuable to see how is this person doing it. So I enjoy those kind of videos on YouTube, and whenever someone shares,
that's definitely a topic that we're gonna be covering here. In fact, it'll probably be the next one that we do, where we're not like interviewing somebody, is kind of talking about what sort of
nice. I'm gonna watch it.
Awesome. So
yeah, just send it.
Will do. Yeah. So now let's go ahead and transition. I know you mentioned you have a couple questions for us. If anybody else has questions for Alexander, they can type those into chat now, and those will show up. So in the meantime, while chat is hopefully typing away, let's hear what you got, Alexander. You said you had some questions.
Yeah. So we talked about the goals and stuff, but one of my long-term goals is eventually to build a family. And so I heard that you were married. So we are actually close in the age, and I'm 28 years old, right? So I'm curious, and I'm single. I'm just curious, like, how is marriage life, and how is it to be married at such young age, in my opinion?
I didn't know. So I
very
got
young.
married at 23. Okay, I even younger. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so usually
I didn't
people's
know that.
first question is, well, did you get her pregnant? And the answer is no. No, I did not. So
Okay.
we no, I knew my wife 5 years before that because we met at a heavy metal concert. So she's a pretty cool person in general. She's also like, our honeymoon was going to Japan, so I was super into Japanese stuff.
Sweet.
She's also into that stuff too. I met her in the States, so she's not Japanese or anything. She's actually Mexican, in case people are interested. But she, so meeting her, somebody that I can listen to heavy music with and talk about Weeb anime stuff with, we have a lot of it in common. So when people ask, like how is marriage? Well, it's like I'm married to my best friend, and we watch anime in Japanese together without understanding it and still have a good time. So it's pretty awesome.
Nice.
Here's the thing that I didn't
Amazing.
expect. When I got married, I didn't have any expectations for like what she would be doing. Like she's still working on like going to school and that sort of stuff. But it turns out my wife is a fantastic cook. I did not count on this. This was an extra benefit that I just didn't know. So now also, like, not only do I have all of those things, but I got a full belly like every day. So again, like downsides, it's like, yeah, there's, it with anything, there's living with somebody else makes you put other people's needs first, right? And us being selfish creatures in general, like that can be something difficult at times, but that as a downside has its benefits, right? Like it's constantly pushing me to be a better person. So yeah, it's good. I'm super glad we don't have kids yet. She's putting some pressure on me though. We're not getting any younger, she keeps saying. So hopefully there will be some little kanji eaters 5 years out. If it's before 5 years, somebody made a mistake, all right?
Nice.
But 5 years out, all right? So yeah, that's
Nice.
yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yep. Hopefully that answers your question. How is it? It's pretty
Yeah,
good. It
did.
could be really bad. Like it could have turned out that my wife was actually an awful cook, and then who knows what would have happened. But it worked out for me.
Yeah. I'm happy it worked out for you. I hope it works out for me too.
All right, so we got a question in. I have a question for all three of you. How come you are interested in Japanese culture and language, and how did you get into it? So that was from Alpaca. You know this guy, Alexander?
This is one of my most valuable community members in Notion to Anki. He's sending pull requests. He's making videos. Alp, you're amazing. I love you, man.
Yeah,
You're
we
very handsome
appreciate you
too.
jumping in.
Thank you.
So, Alexander, are you, like, that's something we haven't really touched on. I know you mentioned you've been to Tokyo, I think, right? But that was before we went live. What is your interest in Japanese culture or Japanese in general?
So I actually have a very weird connection to it. So when I was growing up, lived in a small island in Norway. Like we moved from Kenya before I used to live there, and that was in the late 90s. So my dad is a news junkie, right? So he watched news. So he had like 3,000 channels, and he had an engine on the roof where he could switch between channels. Like he wanted to watch this part of the world and stuff like that. And the only TV we could watch that we liked as kids was German TV. And the Germans did something really clever. They imported a lot of anime. So we were watching anime when we were growing up as kids, and we didn't know that it was anime. We just watched Dragon Ball. We did Kamehameha, stuff like that, played around. And then later we learned about stuff like manga. We started reading Shonen Jump, if you know that. It's a magazine. So essentially, it's just been a part of my life, and anime was the entry, right? And then you have Japanese music. And then one day I was working on the Linux kernel networking stuff. And one of the maintainers upstream, the David Miller, he was writing about, one of their conferences, right? And they usually, the Linux kernel is distributed, right? So they have people contributing all around the world. So they change where the conference is. They try to do it in Europe, Northern America, Asia, and so on. And he wrote an email, and I was reading the email to learn stuff, and he encouraged people to travel to Japan, right, for the conference. And that was in 2016. And I thought, he's saying go. I should go. Do I want to go? And then he sent another email just a few days later. He said, this is your chance. Like, and it felt like he was writing the email to me, but he was writing it to a newsletter. And then I just, okay, I'm going to Japan. So I went to Tokyo for the first time in 2016. And we were in a conference, Akihabara. So I think like anime is probably a gateway drug for most people. And then you fall in love.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah. What about you, Jordan? I know we've kind of talked about our origin stories a bit, but what actually drew you into Japanese?
Yeah. It was like just knowing a different language. So I was like 5 when I got introduced to Japanese. My person who went to school with me, she was in my class. She was Japanese, and her mom would come in and like bring us food and teach us songs and teach us words. And so I was like, oh, whoa, this is cool. And as you said, like, you know, I would watch anime and Dragon Ball and Yu Yu Hakusho. And so I didn't really know it was anime. I just knew it was like, oh man, this is these cartoons. And then we called them graphic novels, but it was manga. And so I was like, oh yeah, this is great. And that's, like you said, it's how it started. I lived near the library, and I would take home like 30 volumes, read them in a day, and bring them back and be like, oh, okay, I'm about to read something else. So like, that's really where it started. And then, you know, as time went on, I was like 14 when I like remember vividly like watching a show in Japanese. It was like Dragon Ball Z GT, all in Japanese, no English subtitles or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta learn this language. Like this is awesome. So that was where it like started.
For me, it was very similar to Jordan's. It was like so actually, let me see if I can put this on my camera. Where is it? Oh, Godzilla.
Wait, do you have Japan behind you?
So
Nice,
so
that's
there was also a Godzilla vinyl there, and that was my first exposure. Probably was watching old like Godzilla movies, and then there was also Pokemon came out when I was in kindergarten, and they actually sent me a promotional VHS tape, which was weird. I haven't received one since from any other promotional material, but they had targeted me and they told me this will become your life. And so, I took them up on it. Got into Pokemon until I got banned at the school I was going to. So, then it was like reading manga from the library. Like that was the other thing that kept it going. That was like the next step. It was like, okay, well, I've seen these characters with large eyes and tiny noses. Like this is the written form. So got into that. And then it was in high school, I started playing games that like stopped getting translated into English. And I was like, that was the part where I was like, okay, the Tales of series is no longer translated. I should probably just learn Japanese. Yes. So that was the piece that was like, all right, at some point that's going to have to happen. And then my last semester of college, it was like, okay, well, now or never. So, and that started 6 years ago. So that's why I'm here. So,
Nice.
Alexander, did you have any other questions for us?
Yeah, so I had a question. Just I'm curious, like, this is just regards with monetization. So I told you, like, the strategy for me with monetization is like we're not trying to rip people off or make a huge amount on people. It's just that we need to be able to sustain ourselves, me and the team, and then be able to push so that we can generate like a wheel, so we can actually long-term provide value to the Anki and Notion communities. So like, what is your monetization strategy? Is it Patreon, like just a side hustle for fun, or do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. We have just recently added a deep Weeb section to the KanjiEater Patreon, which is one way that people could support this. So I think for us,
Nice.
I will speak for myself. For me, money is a good indicator of if people have interest in something. So I think if people have interest in this, that's one good way to show it, is by putting it there. Our strategy from there is like Jordan and I are still figuring this out. There have been some hiccups with like other collaborations in the community. Yeah. So it's like, hey, we really need to kind of like iron out like how this works between us. And we're still in the process of figuring that out. It looks like the deep Weeb thing still looks to be like my thing. I'm still pushing it. Jordan's kind enough to co-host it with me, and I think he should be compensated reasonably for that. So right now, as of now, if somebody were to give like $1 on Patreon, it gets split 50-50 between us, as long as we're both co-hosting it. So that's the idea. And then of course there's like taxes and that sort of stuff that comes out before either of us get our grubby mitts on it. But like, so there's that piece of it. Then I also have like stuff that I've sold from before. So like Anki add-ons, the dictionary add-ons that I've made as well. Like those are up there. Like, so, but yeah, I think you already hit on it. It's really just like a side hustle thing for fun. I'm not planning on like anytime soon scaling this out to compete with my actual living as a software architect. Like I think that would be cool to do, but it's like I also like my job and the challenges that face me over there. So Jordan, did I miss anything as far as what we were saying?
No, that was good. I think, like you said, I'm not focused on it, I guess, for the money either. And not to say that anyone is, but like, I think whatever, like it's an ongoing conversation. You know, I feel like me and Kanji are always talking. If at any point in time, like someone like dropped $1 million on this, yeah, of course we would talk and negotiate and go with that. But like, I feel like we're in it because we want to be, you know. That's and good. So I think as the way you have it with the Patreon, like I think you're going about it the right way. You're mindfully aware. You're welcome. You're mindfully aware of the challenges you may be confronted with, and you're actively trying to solve them. And I think that mindset in general is going to help you more than like, oh, we'll figure out when we get there, which we've seen, like I said, in the language learning community, that can fall apart very fast. And so, you know, I think you being open, I think definitely take that openness, and I know you have to your Patreons or patrons and to the people who are using Anki to Notion. That way, like you said, you're being transparent. You're letting them know, hey, we're not here to rip you off. We're not here to steal. We want to provide value, but we also want to, you know, keep this train rolling. You know,
exactly. Yeah, and we have a listener question, but like I think one of the challenges we've had, we didn't cover it, but like is. It was a small challenge in the beginning, and it kind of affected me because like some people misunderstood what we were trying to do. And I hope if some of those people are listening right now, our goal with Notion to Anki is to help people, right? Bridge the two tools. Some people have gone in the direction where they try to replace Anki, and people can do whatever they want, but it's not like we want to make it better for Anki users, right? So I don't want to replace Anki. I don't have the capacity or the resources. It's think about the years of development Anki has gone through since 2000 something.
You mentioned, I think I saw this on Twitter, that you're now actually spending like 60% of your time on your projects. Like, how has that been?
Like, yeah. So now my boss is really kind. He let me so I resigned essentially. So I worked 100% in September, and I'm 60%. So I'm trying to figure out the income, and I've done something similar. So I always manage to get back on track if it doesn't go well. But like I really believe in challenging your limits. Yeah. So that's what I'm hoping to do. And then if worst comes to worst, I have skill sets that are really valuable and highly desired, right? So I can always figure out something. But I'm hoping to be able to sustain myself by providing value to especially the Anki ecosystem, but also Notion users. The challenge with Notion users is it's really commercial from the beginning. So I don't know what the right direction is, but the Anki, it's free. Like think about it. You're helping students in their learning journey. Like consider like what kind of value you're providing. You're helping people, and you might be able to change their lives forever, essentially. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
isn't
for
it?
sure.
Yeah,
I would love at some point, and maybe like we certainly won't have time today, but talk about like the ideas behind like financial independence and like leveraging those sorts of ideas to like do kind of the things that you're talking about, which is, you know, whatever thing you want to go even deeper on, which in your case is like, you know, Notion Anki providing insane value to people. Like how do you do that while you know, still being fed? So that's hopefully
I definitely
no, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I'm saying as a teacher, like, so I teach people how to code, like kids.
Nice.
I've done adults, like, and like you said, like it's being able to like, hey, teach them somebody or teach them the skill set that can literally change their life. Like I've received from one of my students. She was like, "I'm so glad I went through this program. I'm so glad you were there. I'm so glad." Like
You're talking
'cause
about like
she's now in
coding
web
boot
dev and
camp,
she
right,
loves it.
Jordan?
Yeah, yeah. So yes, yeah. And so she was
That's
like, I
awesome.
love it. She's like, I would have, because she had a master's in education, and she's like, I don't really want to go the education route anymore, and like learned how to code and turned it around, and it's just like that feeling of like, man, like I really helped somebody, like
Sweet.
that feeling is you can never money can never replace that.
Yeah, it's a magic.
So we want to get into this last question here we have from QA from Alp again. So how well do you speak Japanese? You want to kick us off on this one too, Alexander?
Yeah, sure. So skoshi desu. So just a little bit. I go to classes, so I get to practice. But the challenge with learning a language is actually speaking it. So I have content recommendation I look forward to mentioning.
Go ahead.
So,
What
yeah,
content?
I just speak a little bit. Yeah, so there's something called the Michel Thomas method. And they actually have these
I've done that.
CDs that you can use. And what's really cool...
I do.
Oh, so you know the format. Maybe you can tell us about the format. You're so good at explaining
let me
it.
see if I remember. It's been probably 5 years, but you correct me if I go wrong. So it's basically a classroom of students, and there's a native speaker, and it might be the same person as the teacher as well. But there's at least a native speaker, a teacher, and then a classroom, and they will go through these set phrases that are pretty beginner, like basic fundamental stuff that you need to learn if you're going to, not wind up in a ditch in Japan. And yeah, they'll do something like, where are you going? And then the class will repeat back, where are you going? That sort of thing. And then eventually there's like some call and response style things where they will say some phrase that will trigger some other phrase that you then repeat back. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. But it's even more nuanced than that. So there is actually a teacher which is not a native speaker there. And the students do make mistakes. So you can actually detect the mistakes. And if you do it correctly, where you pause when you get the question, you can go multiple directions. Like you could go from English to Japanese, and then you can go the other way around, right? There are some cases where they say Japanese, and then you figure out what the meaning is. And so it's like you're building blocks, and it's conversational, right? Of course, the pausing stuff is artificial, right? Where you click pause and then you answer, but still you do go through the oral practice. So I want to use that more. And I really felt like, at least for korewa, sorewa, and all of those, you get to practice those, right? But I've only listened to the CD one, so I don't know how it gets afterwards with the further full resource.
So, Jordan, did you have anything to say on that? Go ahead.
For the question?
Yeah, sure. Either on that or around, like, how well do you speak Japanese?
I speak it okay. I don't know. I think it's okay. I feel like I can communicate decently. I've used to live in Japan, so in 2014 I studied abroad, and like that's where I felt like my speaking was like I was like fluid with it. It was like water almost. And like now coming back, it hasn't been the same. It's definitely gone down, but like I feel like if I'm in a spot where people are speaking it and like the conversation is going and it's flowing, my brain can jump back into that flow. But it's, I don't know. Yeah, that's I don't speak it on a regular basis. I do want to. That is one of my like 2021 goal is to like take italki lessons or like find someone like whether it be a friend or like someone who I'm like really vibing with, and then I can just talk normally and regularly with them. But I don't speak too often.
Most of you can hear in depth on what Jordan and I did on our first episode, and it's kind of long, but it does cover the things that I found to be most impactful, like going through it. But I will say for me, like I spent 4.5 years learning Japanese in traditional ways, and I look back at that being a complete waste of time. Well, not a complete waste, but at least mostly a waste of time until I started actually doing like native content for natives. And even if you don't understand, just keep going forward with it. Just keep going. And that really comes from like the AJATT style of thing. MattVsJapan has a lot of great content out there on how to really think about language acquisition. And so those things are the things that helped me fundamentally change my Japanese ability and get a lot better at it. So where am I right now? Well, like I said, 4.5 years-ish of like traditional ways. And then I bottlenecked, or plateaued is I guess the right word. And I couldn't get past like an N3 JLPT level. So that's like basic intermediate stuff. I could have conversations already at that point. I was doing like hour-long italki lessons like every day in Japanese. But it was still really basic. Then I went to Japan for 6 months, and I would do things like hour-long presentations about like software architecture and that sort of thing. So it's like I had to get better, but I'm still not good. I'm still not fluent. I still make a lot of mistakes. Actually, just yesterday, met with a friend that speaks Japanese. She's actually native, and she started saying something to me in Japanese, and I responded back, and I was like, I was using like polite style of speaking, even though I didn't really need to, and it was just like, oh man, I'm doing weird things because I'm kind of 6 months out of practice, not being over there. At the same time, my Japanese ability has actually gotten way better in the last 6 months that I've been back in the States. And the reason for that is because I've just been like immersing a complete crap ton. So like we're talking like 5 hours a day. So it's like I've been making a lot of progress on my goal with Japanese. And so for me, it's not about how well can I speak it. It's more about how well can I understand it. And that's the part that I'm focusing in on. But yeah, if there was a Japanese person here with us today, I could probably have an all right conversation with them, but there would definitely be spots where I am stopping. I'm saying, hey, I did not understand that. What do you mean by that? Can you say that a different way? And then things like I just didn't understand you, or I misunderstood you. Things that already happen with English speaking, just way worse.
Yeah.
Nice. You guys have been long to Japan. Like my trips have only been like short, like 1-2 weeks at most, and then I go back home.
I've been over there 5 times now.
Yeah, 2 months was
But
the
2
longest
months
I
for
said.
you, Jordan?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah, I took 5 trips over there, and the 5th one was that 6-month one, which was a deal with my work, which still I can't believe actually happened. So it was pretty great.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess
I'm trying to get like that. I've only been once.
yeah. You're gonna have to go back and see how different it is for you, Jordan, because I mean I'm sure you've gotten quite a bit better with all the reading you've done. So
Yeah.
we're definitely at a good point. I think we've been going about an hour and a half, so like we can go ahead and start to wrap it. Oh, I guess I have content recommendations too. Let's jump into some content recommendations, then really wrap it up. Jordan, do you have anything this time to recommend?
All I've been doing, what is it? The Promised Neverland. I've been reading that. The Demon Slayer just came out with its like second to last book. I think it's 20,
wait, second to last?
The 20.
Is it ending?
Yeah. Yeah, it's over.
Demon Slayer?
Over. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Mind blown. All right.
Yeah. It's like volume 22 is out. It just got released like this weekend, and then volume 23, I believe, is the final volume for sure. So I'm reading that one. What else? Immersion. Yeah, those are the only things I've been really reading. And I don't know if anyone's into video game stuff. So like IGN, I just noticed they have a page in Japanese. It's like jp.ign.com or something like that. That's been good. And they also have like a podcast.
That's what I was going to say. That was one of the podcasts I found when you recommended listening to gaming podcasts in Japanese. That was,
Yeah, I've been listening to that, and I'm like, oh man, this is so good. So, that's all I have.
So, for me, once again, I will shout out Dorohedoro. So anything by, I think her name's Q Hashida. But anyways, I got my Dorohedoro hoodie on, if anybody can see it on the screen. And it is a sweet hoodie. I got this in Japan. But anyways, Dorohedoro is super violent, super gritty, heavy metal in manga form. And it's got references in it to like bands like Slipknot and stuff like that, even though it's super Japanese. So there's a lot of really cool art in it, gory, unique world. But then somehow it's a comedy too. So it's weird, it's unique. And that's completely wrapped up. That's about 23 volumes as well, actually, I believe. And it also had an anime that covered the first half of it. So yeah, just dive into that. That's really cool content. And right now being serialized is her new series, which is Daidark. And that one is Dorohedoro in space. So that one's pretty cool. Also, she helped work on this one game called Maken X, which I think she did a manga for it, but it's like by the people who made Persona, I think, but it was on Sega Dreamcast, and it is a first-person sword slasher. So it's still FPS, but it's like first persons with swords. So I haven't played that, but I was like, whoa, so...
Oh, do they have Personas in that game?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. It's old, and it had artwork that was from the dude who did the Persona artwork. But anyways, yeah, that's that author. It's a female too, which is also interesting that she's made some of the goriest, most gruesome content. So check that out. She's pretty awesome. Let's see. So wrapping things up, Alexander, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so if you want to make flashcards much easier and you use Notion or are curious, you can go to anki.net and check out our project there. I'm on Twitter at Alemayhu. I don't know how to say that in English, but we'll probably have some links in the show notes. And so that's how you can find me. And if you're struggling with Anki, just send me a message and I'll try to cheer you up. I can be your cheerleader. I know how hard it can be. And so don't give up. You can do it. I believe in you. So if I had advice,
let me ask the question, and then you hit us with that answer. All right? No, you're good.
Sorry.
So what's one piece of advice? So what Alexander is alluding to is that I would like to ask our guests a consistent question about learning. So the question is, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone on the path to learning a new skill? So Alexander, please.
Yeah, thanks. One thing that is really difficult when you're learning is that if you're doing it alone, and that's very common if you're learning a new skill, so you don't know what you're doing. So if the skill set you're learning is for the long term, or it takes time to learn it, usually if it doesn't take that much time, you can learn it fast, right? But if it takes a while, then try to break down the skill you're trying to learn and try to do it as early as possible. And when doing it, ask yourself very early, like, what is it that you can improve related to that skill? Just one small improvement every day. And then you can follow something the Japanese people call Kaizen. So you can do it continuously, just a little bit. Kaizen is not something you do. It's something you become, like you make it a part. It's endless. You'll keep on doing it. So try to just do one thing to improve in that skill set every day. Just a small thing. Doesn't have to be big. And if you want to have something bigger, make it a little bit bigger than one thing, but try to do just one thing, or to develop the skill, if it makes sense. Yeah. Kaizen for life.
There you go. That's great. Thanks so much for sharing that. Thank you so much again for being the first person on the show. Jordan, as always, where can we find you?
Twitter, just Bearded Super Saiyan. Or Bearded SSJ. I can't remember what I'm called anymore.
It's down below if you're looking at it. It's also going to be in the show notes. I'm at KanjiEater, KanjiEater everywhere. So say hi to me as well. Like I said, we've got our own Patreon now as well, so you guys can help support Jordan and myself on our endeavors of having conversations with interesting people like Alexander. So again, Alexander, thanks for being on the show. We'll go ahead and wrap up a successful 4th podcast. Thank you.